Great. Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending on where you're joining us today. My name is Elena Sokova. I'm the Executive Director of the Vienna Center for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation. And it is my greatest pleasure to moderate this keynote presentation session of the EU Non-Proliferation and Disarmament Consortium annual conference. Many of you, obviously, who follow the NPT and nuclear issues know that the year 2020 is an important milestone for the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. It marks the 50th anniversary of its entry into force and the 25th anniversary of its indefinite extension. Those who are familiar and follow the NPT review process are also almost unanimous in their views that the 10th review conference, initially scheduled for spring 2020, was slated for a challenging ride, particularly given the tension and even growing confrontation between the key nuclear powers, the United States, Russia, and China, lack of progress, and even regress in arms control and disarmament issues, growing polarization between nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states, marginal progress towards the negotiation and conclusion of the weapons of mass destruction free zone in the Middle East, and many other issues. It is a really heavy portfolio to carry on its own, even without the impact of the COVID pandemic, which already caused the postponement of the review conference meeting twice. Ambassador Zlauvinen, it is probably many people are taking their hats off in thinking about how much responsibility and effort and work you have to carry on in preparing for the review conference and its conduct. And I'm very pleased that you are available to join us today. For those of you who don't know, and most of you do, Ambassador Gustavo Zlauvinen is President-designate of the 2020 Review Conference for the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. He is also a distinguished Argentinian diplomat with a long career in multilateral diplomacy. He served as delegate of Argentina to a number of disarmament, nuclear energy, and arms control conferences and meetings, including at the IAEA Board of Governors and General Conference, the United Nations General Assembly's First Committee, the NPT review process, the Conference on the Adoption of Nuclear Safety Convention, and many other fora and negotiations. Without further ado, I would like to give the floor to you, Ambassador Zlauvinen. Please.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you for your introductions remarks. So, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues, and friends, my congratulations, first of all, to the consortium for arranging another successful European Union Conference on Disarmament and Non-Proliferation under difficult circumstances. As always, and as we have seen in the previous panel, you have your finger on the pulse of the most timely and important issues affecting our work. But before I start my speech, allow me to express my solidarity and sympathy with all those countries and peoples who are suffering through this terrible pandemic. We are learning many hard lessons from COVID-19, including the need to act in unison when it comes to confronting global threats. The European Union and its member states are among the staunchest defenders of the global nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation regime. Nowhere is this more the case than in the European Union's support for the NPT. So the Bureau and I are most grateful for your ongoing support, and especially for the cross-regional project the EU has so generously funded to help lay the ground for a successful 10th Review Conference. As with many other aspects of our lives, the COVID-19 pandemic has temporarily halted this project, but we remain hopeful that it will be able to resume soon. Today, I want to address one of the key issues highlighted by this conference: the urgent need to rebuild mutual trust in arms control, disarmament, and non-proliferation. Albert Einstein wisely noted that, and I quote, "Every kind of peaceful cooperation is primarily based on mutual trust," end of quotation. This is clearly the case for the pursuit of a world free of nuclear weapons. The absence of trust and confidence, especially between states that possess nuclear weapons, is a primary obstacle to further gains in nuclear disarmament, and is accelerating arms racing dynamics, including in the deployment of new weapons. More broadly, the dearth of trust is exacerbating proliferation drivers. It is my firm belief that the NPT at its 10th Review Conference can play an important role in redressing this situation. The Review Conference is a unique opportunity to facilitate dialogue, cooperation, and engagement, even if that engagement entails disagreements between nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states, and among nuclear weapon states. Dialogue at the Review Conference takes place at both a ministerial level and at a working levels. The conference engages policy, legal, and technical experts for each of the treaty's 3 pillars across the spectrum of government personnel, diplomats, uniformed, and regulators. It also attracts a broad array of expertise from outside the government, including civil society, industry, scientists, and academics. It is cliché to say that the NPT is the cornerstone of the disarmament and non-proliferation regime, but that does not make the sentiment any less true. 50 years after its entry into force, the NPT retained its status as a pillar of international security for 4 reasons. First, it contains legally binding disarmament commitments, including on the 5 nuclear weapon states. 2, it has credible, verifiable non-proliferation obligations. 3, it is an essential platform for the transfer of peaceful uses of nuclear science and technology. And 4th, its near universal status means that these commitments and obligations are binding on the vast majority of the international community. Unfortunately, the enduring nature of COVID-19 has meant that NPT state parties have had to postpone the review conference for a second time to August 2021. This is not a decision that was taken lightly, but one made in the face of a pandemic that is not abating, and one that was warranted for the safety and well-being of all delegates and UN staff, and to ensure that the review conference can be held in such a way that meets state parties' priorities. Now, are there costs to the postponement? Of course. But as state parties have already proven over the last 7 months, They are adept at spinning adversity into advantage. Through virtual consultations, webinars, and other online events, the Bureau and state parties, supported by civil society and other stakeholders, have sought to keep the NPT on the world's radar and maintain momentum. As President-designate, I will continue my consultations with state parties. To date, these have been robust conversations that dealt not only with procedural matters, but also with important issues of substance. I encourage state parties to continue holding their own dialogues and events and devising their own initiative to lay the ground for success when the review conference is held. Cross-regional coalitions, such as the Stepping Stones Initiative, the NPTI, the New Agenda Coalition, or the De-Alerting Group, are welcome endeavors that can help create broad-based support for common ground. In all of these, I believe state parties will find willing partners in the UN Office for Disarmament Affairs and in civil society, and myself. My point here is that since the original postponement of the review conference in March, much thought has already gone into achieving success. I hope that this extension will entrench that thinking and nourish the green shoots of convergence that I have seen begin to poke their way into the sunlight. I'm not naive, of course. Achieving a successful outcome will be a challenge no matter when the review conference is held. But if this hiatus is used appropriately, it can remove some of the obstacles in our path. Strengthening the NPT and the regime it upholds is critically important at this juncture in history. One only has to glance at any media platform to see how developments around nuclear weapons are progressing. The international security environment is fraught. All states that possess nuclear weapons are modernizing their arsenals in ways that do not just maintain the status quo, but qualitatively improve them. The prominence of nuclear weapons in security doctrines is once again on the rise, at a time when relationships between the states that possess them are in serious decline. There has been an alarming proliferation of delivery vehicles, such as ballistic missiles, too. And technological advances have created the so-called strategic conventional weapons that, absent proper guardians, have the potential to increase miscalculation. Likewise, developments in cyberspace and outer space have introduced new risks to the nuclear equation, particularly as they relate to command and control. And at the same time, regional conflicts with nuclear dimensions continue to stoke proliferation concerns. In such an environment, without dialogue, engagements, and transparency, to quote the Greek tragedian Sophocles, and I quote, "Trust dies, but mistrust blossoms," end of quotation. In such an environment, mistrust can have dangerous, unintended consequences. This is why the 10th Review Conference presents such an important opportunity. Any of you that have been listening to me for the last 7 months will be well acquainted by now with my mantra, which is, it is not within my purview to dictate what a successful review conference looks like. That is entirely the terrain of the NPT state parties. It is, however, my responsibility to endeavor to facilitate an outcome that is balanced across all three of the three pillars of the treaty: disarmament, non-proliferation, and peaceful uses, and that strengthens the NPT and the regime of which it is the centerpiece. So I believe that rebuilding mutual trust and confidence among state parties will benefit the treaty and the broader regime. So there are 5 overarching ways in which I believe the review conference can help rebuild mutual trust. First, all state parties can reaffirm their commitment to the NPT and its goals. Second, all state parties should demonstrate implementation of commitments and obligations undertaken as parties to the treaty, including those undertaken at previous review conferences. A practical way to do so, and one already used by many state parties, is through the submission of national reports. Third, all state parties should approach the review conference with a willingness to genuinely negotiate. I appreciate the stakes are high, given the national security implications, but I encourage the state parties to avoid rigid adherence to calcified positions for the duration of the conference. Trust can be built through a willingness to engage with other views, no matter how divergent they may be. Fourth, state parties should listen to the voices of a diverse range of stakeholders, because a plurality of views helps create an environment conducive to the dialogue that seeks trust. This means providing equitable and meaningful participation for women, space for civil society to express their views, an opportunity for industry to participate, and for the younger generations to have their say. Fifth and finally, a balanced approach is essential to building trust. State parties need assurance that commitments and obligations will be honored across disarmament, non-proliferation, and peaceful uses. There are, of course, numerous actions that state parties can undertake beneath each pillar of the NPT in order to rebuild mutual trust. For example, under Pillar 1, the nuclear weapon states should continue to improve transparency around their doctrines and arsenals. Transparency builds confidence, and confidence in turn builds trust. Also, state parties could engage in dialogue on common understandings about the impact of technology on proliferation and strategic stability. And as a third example, and in service of the old adage, trust but verify, state parties could establish how to take further steps in nuclear disarmament verification that strengthen all states' security. Under Pillar 2, the verification by the International Atomic Energy Agency of the NPT's safeguard system and the trust that it engenders is a central enabler of the treaty. Ensuring a system that is able to properly carry out its responsibilities should be of the highest priority for state parties. As adoption of nuclear power and non-power applications increases worldwide, it is essential that state parties demand that all newcomers adopt appropriate levels of safeguards, as well as safety and security. In the past, Pillar 3, which facilitates access to nuclear science, technology, and energy, has often been taken for granted, if not overlooked. This cannot be the mentality the state parties take into the 10th Review Conference. It diminishes the crucial role that Pillar 3 has played in building support for disarmament and non-proliferation. But more importantly, it fails to take into account the increasingly prominent role the peaceful use of nuclear science and technology plays in improving the daily lives of communities all over the world. Facilitated by the IAEA, nuclear science is driving fulfillment of the Sustainable Development Goals in health, agriculture, and water management, climate change, and environmental protections, to mention just a few. So in giving Pillar 3 its proper appreciation, the review conference can build trust that the interests of all three parties are being accounted for. So, to conclude, the reestablishment of mutual trust is a goal to which the NPT and its review conference can contribute, but it's clearly also something from which the treaty can benefit. Trust and confidence will strengthen implementation of the NPT and, by extension, the global nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation regime. In today's uncertain environment, this is a goal we should all be striving for. And I thank you.
Couldn't agree more, Ambassador Zlauvinen. It seems like the theme of today's meeting throughout various discussions, from the opening to the arms control session in current discussion, is that one of the most lacking virtues is trust nowadays, and we need to do everything in our hands to restore, rebuild the trust, and find a way to hear each other and to negotiate. There are a couple of questions from the previous panel that I would have liked to pose to you, but I'm watching of the time, and there are a couple of interesting questions that are coming up in the Q&A from the participants. Two of them specifically I would like to pose to you, and they're particularly the first one really relates to rebuilding the trust and having a civil discussion at the meetings. Coming from Veronica Bedenka, the question is there a strategy that could be implemented by a secretariat and a president to reduce toxicity of discussions and keep deliberations on a productive track? That's number one, the question. The second question that I would like to pose, and it's maybe I'll modify it a little bit. Fonenifa Matu-chan and from myself, asking about the role of regional approaches to disarmament and non-proliferation, and how they could contribute to better achievements in this area. And here I also want to reference the novelty of the process proposed earlier by the Netherlands to really start in the previous review cycle, to start this regional consultations before the review conference and before the prep comms. How much you see the role of the regional consultations first, and second, in general regional approaches to the conversations. And I'll pause now, give you the floor, and if we have time, I'll ask you a few more questions.
Thank you, Elena, and thank you for the participants that put those very interesting questions. On the first one, if there is a strategy by the Secretary of the Bureau and myself as a President-designate to entice more productive and civil discussions amongst the parties, I think just, our approach is let's try to get them engaged as often and as much as possible in all the key core issues related to the NPT and the review conference. I believe that we have managed to do so during the past 7 months through the consultations held with the regional groups of the NPT, meaning that the NAM, WEOC, the Eastern European groups, and the Group of One China, in which I push those groups exactly to start discussing on a thematic approach, the different issues, how we can make progress on nuclear disarmament. That was just one set of consultations, and I focus that consultation with the Geneva-based delegations and New York, which are more linked to that. The other one set of questions were more about the non-proliferations and how we tackle the non-proliferation challenges and new technologies. And that was conducted much more focused on the Vienna-based delegations. And also on Pillar 3, peaceful applications also was, again, with our colleagues based in Vienna. So I think just, for the first time, at least in my knowledge, then just, just the Bureau and the President-designate having, just pushing state parties in the consultations to start tackling, the issues on a thematic manner. Normally, when you conduct, consultations with state parties, aside of the logistics, the procedures, obviously, in this case, are very important because we have to postpone the review conference twice. But in general, the consultations are seen by the state parties to take the floors and to deliver their national positions on all the matters, from nuclear disarmament to the Middle East to everything. And I think that's, although it's beneficial to me and the members of the Bureau to listen those positions, we thought it was better to tackle them in clusters. So force delegation to look into one cluster and give us answers and also listen to each other. And that is linked to the second question, regional approaches. And I think that this is what we're doing through the consultation, because at the end of the day are regionals. But I think there have been some proposals, and I'm thinking of that, maybe in the future to have this type of consultations with, just cross-regional consultations. Because obviously when you have consultation with NAM, you will have one saying, or a great majority of state parties will agree on most positions. And when you have consultation with the WEOC, you will have a different set of, although there are differences between those groups, but just the overall sense is very unique. Yes. So I'm thinking maybe just to do a cross-regional consultation, just to force them just to listen and to talk to each other, even if this is disagreement. But I think that the regional approach is more, I think the question is more linked to what the European Union have been doing and have been trying to support is the sub-regional approaches. So it's not only with the NAM, but then just let's go and listen and talk to state parties of the African region, or with the Asian, Asia, or Latin American. I think that is more interesting, because then you dissect the positions much more into their own realities. Obviously, state parties from the same geographical sub-region tend to share much more the position than state parties in NAM, but from different regions. So I think that's a very, very useful approach. I think we have already started. The pandemic forced us to stop it, but we are planning maybe to start again, maybe one in Middle East, another one in Latin America, and so forth. I think this is very, very interesting. So I think just both approaches have to be pursued. The one is like the traditional through the NAM and WEOC and Eastern Europeans, but I think that the other one maybe one across regional, that will be quite interesting, and then just going to the sub-regional. I think there are 3 levels. I think we have to aim at all of them, and we have to be creative. And again, my approach is let's entice conversations, dialogue. Dialogue doesn't need to be that everybody's in agreement. Look, if 191 state parties to the NPT were to agree on everything, we wouldn't be having this conference. It would be like a family reunion in which everybody agreed. So what? I mean, why the review conference is important is because not necessarily all state parties agreed on all the issues. Yes, and yes, I heard before, just in the previous panels, the position between Ambassador Fu and Chris, and of course, some people may take it as a very problematic. I don't take it, and I say that I welcome that, because the more frank discussion we have between those state parties and have a lot of saying in the review process, the better chances we have to have a review conference that is going to be fruitful and meaningful. I don't like just the expression of success or not success. There are different ways to measure success, and there will be as many position as people are. But if we try to get a meaningful review conference, in my mind, that will be in itself a success, regardless of the outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Zlauvinen. I don't know whether we can go further. I haven't received anything from the organizer, but I assume we could because we were a little bit late to start this session. Linking to some of the discussion about the regional issues and approaches, one of the key questions that our audience wants to know, and myself, is what role do you think the weapons of mass destruction free zone in the Middle East issues will play during the upcoming review conference? And I would also pose another question that I see a number of people referring to, is discussing the entry into force of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and its impact on the upcoming NPT Review Conference. So these two pretty big questions. I hope we can continue to the discussion.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. The Middle East nuclear weapons free zone has been in the past and will continue to be in the next review conference an important and crucial issue. I think just the dynamics regarding this issue are in a very important juncture, in particular because of the UN promoted conference that was held in November 2019, and that is obviously kind of forcing state parties to the NPT to rethink about that. And based on my consultations, I can see that while an important number of state parties, in particular from the Middle East regions, they welcome that conference in November 2019 as one of the steps that the 1995 NPT Review Conference decisions on the establishment of nuclear weapons-free zones in the Middle East goes into the lines. So they consider the conference in November 2019 as a very important step forward into that implementation. Others, including state parties from the same region, they see that there are two different tracks that are not linked. So therefore, the review conference should not even just consider the conference, the UN conference in November 2019 as part of the NPT track. And then you have another set of state parties that they even don't want to consider or even mention the UN conference in November 2019. So obviously that is providing more just a complexity to this already very complex issue. And I hope that we can find just the right balance on how we tackle the issue. But I think more importantly, how state parties devise or decide how to keep moving on these issues for in the next 5 years. On the second issue, on the TPNW and its entry into force, obviously it's a new issue in the sense that 5 years ago in the last review conference we didn't have that because the TPNW was negotiated and adopted just after 2015. It was actually in 2017. So it's a new issue for the review conference, and I'm expecting to be an issue that is going to be divisive in the sense that there are many state parties to the NPT that also are state parties to the TPNW, and obviously are going to push for a reference or recognitions at the review conference of the relevance of the TPNW, while others that have not signed or ratified the TPNW will refuse to have any mention because they don't see a link between both treaties. So I think just it's going to be difficult, but also I believe that if we find the right approach, a balanced approach, maybe we can accommodate both views. Whether the entry into force is going to make those state parties to both the NPT and the TPNW pushing for more at the Review Conference or not, it's up to them. I think just now that they have entered into force, they can be more, obviously they are very pleased, but they already have their own treaty, yes, and I don't, I'm not an expert on that treaty, but probably they will have their own review conferences in the future. So I think that they can take that issue at their own review conference, and obviously that state party to the NPT that are not party to the TPNW in the future, they would like to have in the TPNW review conference, if there is such a thing, also a mention to the NPT. So it goes both ways. I don't think it's going to be a make it or break it issue at the review conference. I hope not, but it's going to be present and it's going to be part of the discussions, and it's already been addressed during the consultations. So I'm fully aware, and I'm expecting to have some difficult negotiations on this issue. But again, I don't think it's going to be a break it or make it issue. I hope so.
Thank you, Ambassador Zlauvinen. One last question that I would like to pose to you is, how do you see all these new intergovernmental approaches or new initiatives fitting into the review conference process and contributing to the strengthening of the NPT, including the C&D, Stockholm Initiative, and to kind of borrow from the previous session, P5 process, for example?
I believe that all these initiatives are well intended. If you look into the compositions of all these groups, at the end of the day, the initiatives are a reflection of groups of state parties. Interesting enough that there are several state parties that belong to 2 or more initiatives. Yes, so there is a common denominator over there, and all the initiative, what they're trying to do is it's to bring some common sense, to bring some common understandings on some of the most important issues for the NPT, and trying to bring some proposal that could just help the way out at the review conference. So I welcome all of them. I'm working with all of them. I'm having consultations with all these initiatives. And always I say that what we need in this very difficult juncture in our history, we need bridge builders. And I believe that all or many of the governments participating in those initiatives have traditionally worked as a bridge builders. And in a sense, I take this initiative as bridge builders for a successful outcome.
Thank you so much. Indeed, we need as much bridge building and other initiatives and support to have not only the successful review conference, but also really rebuild trust across different fora and international organizations and negotiations. But unfortunately, we have exhausted the time allotted, even the extended time for this session. And in this regard, I would really like to thank you on behalf of the organizers of this conference, on the EU Consortium, on Non-Proliferation and Disarmament, and myself for making yourself available. We wish you success in preparation for the review conference, and as part of the civil society, we're always happy to extend our expertise and any assistance we can provide to you. With that, I'm gonna close the session and actually the day. So that's the end of the first day of the conference. And just a reminder to those of you who are still staying with us that tomorrow we reconvene at 9 a.m. Stay safe and healthy, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Elena. Bye.